Welcome to Syndicated Nightmares, where each week we take a deep dive into an episode of Freddy's Nightmares based on the Nightmare on Elm Street film series. Hosts Dave and Michelle are covering episode 16, Cabin Fever, which aired February 19th, 1989, written by Rhett Topham and directed by our very own Robert Englund.
Great.
Episode Cabin Fever, the synopsis is, an airline heir discovers he is on a flight to hell. A flight attendant thinks she has found Mr. Right. And that flight attendant is also our very own Leslie Deane. Yeah, there's in Nightmare 6 as Tracy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's amazing.
Did you like Nightmare 6?
I mean, I love it, but if I were ranking the original 7 movies, it would be towards the bottom. But I still love it, and I love Tracy. She's probably my favorite character in that movie.
Yeah, I like Nightmare 6 a lot. I like it for its humor. But like you, when I rank it, it's down towards the bottom. Mm. And I love Tracy. I would style my hair like Tracy when that movie came out. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I would practice my kicking and karate, even though I didn't have a punching bag. I would just pretend like the one was there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Doc would be giving me advice on how great my kicks were.
Nice. She's such a badass. I love that she just sort of charges into the nightmares, and she's one of the few characters that just sort of runs at Freddy when she sees him.
Yeah, I like her too for those exact reasons.
And before this episode, she worked with Robert Englund as a director, because he directed the movie 976 Evil, and she was in that as well.
Mm-hmm. And we'll get to it later on, but in this episode, the flight number, it's 976.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
I heard it and I wrote it down, and I was like, that has to be 976. Yeah. The guy who wrote this episode, he also wrote 976 Evil.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so all three of them just have the same background with that film.
Yeah, family reunion from 976 Evil.
Yeah, so I wonder if Robert Englund had anything to do with Leslie Deane getting on Nightmare 6.
I think I read in an interview she said that they knew who she was when she auditioned. So it probably helped her a bit.
Especially if Robert Englund likes you or respects you as an actor, you are a shoo-in for whatever film that he wants or that he's a part of.
Yeah. And you and I met her in 2008?
At Frightmare, at Texas Frightmare.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, we were talking about roller derby because my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, my wife, she played roller derby. And Leslie Deane played roller derby. Their teams never played against each other, but yeah, so we talked about roller derby, and then Leslie Deane, for whatever reason, picked me up bride and groom style, she was to carry me over, and she picked me up that way. And I think you took a photo of it, and I still have that photo somewhere of her carrying me that way. I'll post it with this episode.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And I have a picture of her pretending to kick me in the stomach. And I remember I doubled over like she was actually kicking me, and after the picture she's like, "You're the first person who knew how to react." So I was very honored.
Do you still have it?
Somewhere. I have it somewhere digitally. I'll have to look for it.
Yeah, find it, and we'll post all our pictures with Leslie Deane on Instagram for this episode. And if you want to follow us on Instagram, you can find us at Syndicated Nightmares on Instagram. Back to Cabin Fever. So, okay, do you remember how it starts out?
It starts out, so the main character's name is Carl, and he's played by Brett Cullen, who he's still a working actor in lots of stuff, but I recognize him as the uncle on the TV show Bates Motel. But anyway, his name is Carl, and he's in an airplane lavatory, and the flight attendant comes in, who is Leslie Deane, and they start making out. And then the return to seat light goes on. So he goes back to his seat, and then it sort of turns into this. It turns into a nightmare. There's no other people on the plane, and there's this heavy turbulence, and the oxygen masks come down, but his isn't working. So he's having this nightmare about the plane crashing.
Yeah, and there's turbulence while he's being seduced by Leslie Deane.
I guess he rushes to his seat as soon as the light goes on.
he starts daydreaming. Maybe I'm getting ahead of the episode, but he has a daydream boarding the plane that he's going to spend 3 blissful nights in Springwood. And that just, anytime someone says, oh, we're going to have a great time in Springwood, it's like, no, you aren't.
Right.
We all know you aren't.
After he wakes up, so he wakes up from that dream, and, you know, there's other people on the flight, and Leslie Deane really is a flight attendant. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they're in a relationship, and they talk about how they're going to go spend 3 nights in Springwood. Mm-hmm.
It sounds like they won a trip playing Wheel of Fortune. And like that was one of the prizes for solving the puzzle, that you got to spend three nights in Springwood. Mm-hmm. Vanna White's all cheering.
Even the Freddy stuff aside, assuming it was just like this normal town, it doesn't seem like a vacation destination.
No, not at all. But I mean, we know what Springwood is all about. Who knows how Springwood was advertised to them.
Mm-hmm. And apparently it has its own airport, so it's not, once again, evidence that it's not a hick town.
Yeah. Springwood Airport, I assume, is what it's called. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. I wonder what the letters would be for it. You know how like JFK Airport is JFK, and Columbus is CMH, and you have LAX. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wonder what Springwood Airport, I wonder what their letters would be.
I once flew out of Elmira Airport when I was living in New York, and I was excited that the airport's initials were ELM, like Elm Street.
Oh, yeah. That would be so cool. Mm-hmm. I would fly out of there every time just so I could type that in.
Well, it's a nice airport. I recommend it.
Oh, good. Okay.
So he's on the plane after he wakes up from this nightmare, and so it's weird. She says, "How's your dad?" And then he pulls out a newspaper that says "Airparts millionaire dies of heart failure." Mm-hmm. So they're in a relationship, but she doesn't know that his famous father just died.
Well, yeah. So his dad died, and then he now owns the company. But did they really go into detail about what the company is or what they do?
Just that they manufacture parts for airplanes.
Okay. Well, I hope they didn't manufacture the parts for the plane that he's on.
Right. And then he starts talking to the guy sitting across the aisle who used to work for the company. I think his last name is Ash, and the company is Ash something. Maybe it's just called Ash Company. But the guy across the aisle was a former plant supervisor. I could be wrong, but is the guy he talks to on the plane the same guy who's prominent in the second half of the episode? Yeah. Or is that a different person? Okay.
Yeah, it's the same guy. I think his first name is Jim.
Okay.
He used to work at the company, but he was fired by his dad. And I think he said why he was fired. Maybe like a drinking problem or something, but now he doesn't drink. He's like completely sober.
But yeah, they're talking, and he implies that, you know, Carl has just taken over the company because his father died, and Jim is implying that that something was wrong at the company. Mm-hmm. And then we see Freddy, like the camera moves out the window, and we see Freddy on the wing, sort of like that the Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah.
Which I thought was fun.
Which I thought a lot of this, especially with it being completely on a plane for the first half anyway, it just screamed Nightmare 6. Like totally on the plane, because that's how Nightmare 6 opens, where you have John Doe on the plane. And I don't think Freddy is on the wing in Nightmare 6.
Does Freddy even appear on the plane?
I don't think so. Yeah, we don't see him until John Doe wakes up from that nightmare, and then it goes into the whole Wizard of Oz parody. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the bus driving and all that.
Yeah, but the whole thing, I was like, why is this on a plane? Because Nightmare 6 hadn't happened yet. And so then I was like, well, wait, did Nightmare 6 take that opening from this? And like, somehow with both Robert Englund and Leslie Deane being a part of Nightmare 6 and this episode, somehow these two have to like be intertwined, you know, with the whole plane thing. I don't know. Maybe during this episode, Robert Englund was like, hey, I really like the whole plane aspect. Let's throw that into the next Nightmare
Right.
movie. And they were like,
Let's
done.
open the next one with this.
Yeah. Freddy's on the wing of the plane, and then the plane starts having electrical problems, because doesn't like Freddy like start to open the wing of, like, he opens a panel or something and cuts all the electrical? Or am I just making that up? I'm probably making it up.
Maybe.
Okay.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, so Freddy's on the wing of the plane, and the plane starts having electrical problems. So Leslie Deane tells Carl that everything is fine, because she knows that he has a fear of flying. So he pops a few pills, but we don't know like what the pills are. And so he like falls asleep during this turbulence. And when he wakes up, he's all alone on the plane with like smoke coming out of the vents. So he's like opening these vents, and then he sees like rats are inside and they're eating all the wires.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's like where the smoke is coming from.
That would panic me if I saw it on a plane.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I like rats. I used to have pet rats. So I'd be like, oh, like, come here, let me hug you and hold you. But no, if they were eating the wires, I would have a problem with that. So,
but I'm with you though. Rodents are adorable.
So he was alone on the plane, but then all of a sudden, there are people back on the plane, and there are robbers on the plane, and they shoot everyone but Carl. And then they spot him and they try to shoot him, but they miss. And then the plane starts to crash because of all the bullets in the plane. And it turns out that these robbers, they're part of like a terrorist organization called Consumer Terror Squad.
So it's sort of, it's hinting at that that his company that does the airline parts was putting out an inferior product, I guess. I think that was the point of that whole scenario, because then the terrorists like throw a smoke bomb in and leave and are never seen or mentioned again. Yeah,
well, then at that point, the plane lands, I think. And then I wrote, a dead zombie-looking girl on a tricycle comes on board asking for her ball. Like, she comes up to him and says, have you seen my ball? Or where's my ball? Or something like that. And then more people come on board the plane. It's like an elderly couple. They come on the plane. And Leslie Deane starts stamping tombstones on the wall, one for each passenger. So I assume each of these passengers have died on a plane manufactured by his dad's company and his faulty products.
Yes. And Leslie Deane sort of looks like a zombie.
Oh, yeah. I was watching on a very, very small screen, so I didn't really see anything, any like good detail of anything. So these people are coming onto the plane. Leslie Deane is stamping the tombstones, and then it zooms out to the window again, and Carl's dad is out the window screaming that it's a hijack. Which, that in itself was just creepy as hell, to see this guy like peering in the airplane window.
Yeah, I thought it was, I put a star next to it because I thought it was like genuinely good, genuinely unsettling. Yeah. To have that man screaming in the window.
It was kind of funny because it was a bit jarring, but it was also like really creepy, because if I was on that plane and I saw a guy just screaming hijack. Yeah, so Carl's dad is out the window screaming that it's a hijack, and then Leslie Deane, what's her name again?
Sue.
Okay, I like Leslie Deane better. So Sue starts playing the in-flight movie, but the in-flight movie, it's like a reenactment of all the victims and how their death was caused by his dad's company, which I thought was kind of neat to do it that way.
Yeah, although I like that they said they were going to show a real movie. They're like, our movie today is Airport, but first this message. So I was like, I like that movie.
Yeah, and then this is when Leslie Deane, when she does her announcement, like her safety announcement, this is when she said, Flight 976 is ready to depart, or whatever she says. That's when I was like, oh, yeah, like the writer totally threw that in. That's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, the film before the film they showed was really cool, where the little girl and the old couple, and they're like, we died from faulty airplanes.
Mm-hmm. And were they just like all plane crashes that happened because of the bad parts?
I believe so. And then Carl starts coughing up like nails and bolts.
How people do sometimes.
Yeah. And then the flight lands and people get off, and then Carl goes into the cockpit, and his father is there and talks about how he's been making faulty airplane parts, and Carl wants to turn the company around.
Carl wants to do right by the customers.
Right. I mean, it doesn't, aside from, all the ethical implications, it doesn't seem like a good business strategy to to make faulty airplane parts.
Oh, no, not at all.
So, yeah. Go Carl Jr.
Yeah, for trying to do things right. Well, it seemed like the dad was trying to justify it by saying like the company was having money problems or something, so they had to cut corners, and that's why the parts like the company started off doing things right, and they had a good reputation, but then they were losing money for whatever reason. Yeah, that's when they started to cut corners.
Yeah, but it seems like you'd be. If your faulty parts caused plane crashes, that you'd be subject to all sorts of lawsuits.
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, why wasn't there just some huge class action lawsuit against the company, whatever the company is called? But maybe they all settled out of court, and so that's possible. Yeah, I don't know. Something to ask Carl's dad, I guess.
Yeah. Or maybe the wrecks were the planes were so destroyed in the crashes, they couldn't pinpoint the cause of the crash. And it also seems like before these nightmares, Carl was unaware of any of this. Like, this is all news to him.
Yeah, like he's been in the dark the whole time about how his father was running the company. Yeah, so he goes to the cockpit and he sees his dad flying a plane. They're in debt, blah, blah, blah. And then the plane lands, and Carl is dead. It seems like he overdosed on his pills or something. They don't really explain what happened to him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Leslie Deane finds him and sobs.
Which, as much as I love Leslie Deane, and I thought that she was spectacular in Freddy's Dead, I did not care for her performance with sobbing over Carl.
I agree. It was not one of her stronger moments.
No, it was just, it was very, very bland, and I felt like it was the first take that she did of it, and she didn't have time to emotionally prepare for the scene or anything, and it was just a 1, 2, 3, go. And that was it. And they're like, okay, that's a wrap on Leslie Deane.
Yeah, right.
And they never heard from her again.
Right. Well, but then we get to the second half, which is all about Leslie Deane.
Yeah. Maybe they shot it out of order.
Did you notice, was it just me, or did her hair look different in
her
every
hair
scene?
Was totally different.
Okay.
So I think they shot these out of order, and maybe there was a few days in between or something, because her hair was totally different in the second half. And because her hair was different, I didn't know how much time had lapsed from Carl dying in the plane, and to where in the second half it starts off where Leslie Deane is shit-faced at some dive bar that's either at the airport or somewhere close to the airport, because everybody who was on the plane is at this dive bar mourning Carl after his alleged funeral. It was really weird.
Right. Yeah, it's like the bar where all the pilots and flight attendants hang out. And
then Jim, who doesn't drink, he decided to invite himself along to the wake, I guess. And starts Well, he doesn't really flirt with Leslie Deane. She's the one who really flirts with him.
That's true. Does she approach him?
I think when it starts, she's like kind of dancing by herself and he's close by and she turns around and sees him and he's like watching her. But then she like saunters over to him and in her like drunken stupor, she's like, "Hey, do you want to dance?" or something like that. And he's like, "No, how about I just take you home because you need to go to bed."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he tells her that she reminds him of his ex-wife.
Oh, yeah, which is not a good pickup line.
No, it's not.
Mm-mm.
I enjoyed that there was a sign in the bar that just said light beer. Like it wasn't a brand name. It just light beer.
Yeah, light
That's
beer.
what they're advertising.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I have it in my notes that this episode is brought to you by Miller Lite. So I think they were all drinking Miller Lite.
Right. So there's the light beer sign in the bar, and then we go to Freddy in the alley, and there's a Miller sign in the alley.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Which doesn't make sense because if they think that only teenagers are watching the show, why are they advertising alcohol?
Yeah. Good point.
You can't have those plot holes because adults are watching this.
The last time I watched Nightmare on Elm Street 3, I noticed that John Saxon was drinking Miller Genuine Miller High Life. So in honor of that, like the next time I was at the grocery store after that, I bought some of it.
And how was it?
It's the on the bottle it says the champagne of beers. So it was fine.
Yeah,
what you expect.
Because of Nightmare 3, every time I went to church and like dipped my hand in holy water to do the sign of the cross, I wanted to bring a flask with me so I could like get some of the holy water and just bring it home with me. But I was 11 and I didn't have access to a flask. So, now that I'm older, maybe I'll try it. Who knows?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and if the priest yells at me, I'll just give him my driver's license as compensation.
You can keep this.
So Leslie Deane is shit-faced at the dive bar flirting with Jim, who doesn't drink. And they go back to his place, and she finds out that his wife died a year ago. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't really, go into detail about how his wife died.
No, hey, all he really says about her is that she was also a stewardess. But that's...
Oh, okay. I didn't pick that up. Oh, so he has a thing for flight attendants, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Although it seems like if she's a flight attendant, she'd be like, oh, what airline did she work for? Because I'm sure, a lot of flight attendants would know each other. Yeah.
They would have crossed paths at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, in flight attendant school or something. I don't know, training.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even pick up on that.
Yeah.
So they're back at his place, and because he doesn't drink, he kind of wants her to sober up a bit, so he offers to make her some hot cocoa, and then they have a romantic fireplace while drinking hot cocoa and just talking about life, and she doesn't understand why Jim won't make a move on her, and he's like, nah, I'd rather go fishing instead.
Right. He says, I'm leaving to go fishing, and also, don't leave because the woods are full of drunken hunters.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. And I kind of wanted to be like, okay, I mean, my knowledge of straight men is very limited, but I was still like, if you have this woman over and the guy isn't making a move and instead wants to go fishing, he's either asexual or he's going to murder you. Either way, you should just probably leave.
Exactly. It's good that he didn't take advantage of her when she was drunk.
Oh, but yeah, kudos to him.
But by the time they're having cocoa at the fireplace, it seems like she's pretty much sobered up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. and he just was not interested in a sexual evening with her at all, which I guess, like, okay, they don't have to sleep together on their first night. It's just kind of what we are programmed to think should happen. And that's nice if he wanted to take his time with her and, like, get to know her and build a trusting relationship before he dives in. But also, he's a sociopath.
So she goes to bed. He has a separate bed for her to sleep in by herself. And she wakes up and opens the closet, and it's filled with all these flight attendant outfits. And she finds a photo album of all these women bound and gagged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wrote in my notes that she finds a fetish book of women tied up.
And then she wakes up for real, and, you know, everything's normal. The closet's not full of those clothes. And she's eating breakfast, and he comes back in with the fish.
Mm-hmm.
And she's grossed out by, you know, someone holding fresh fish near her head. And he's like, oh, you're just like my ex-wife. She hated these too.
Yeah, and so that's the second time that he's compared her to his ex-wife.
Yes. And I think most people would not, if you had just gone fishing and caught fish, most people would not want you to hold those right near their head.
No, not at all. Like, the smell alone, but also, like, that's kind of rude, guy.
Right. Yeah, so she goes out to drink her coffee on the porch. She comes back in and she's washing her mug. And then I couldn't tell what it was. I wrote in my notes, she finds a smelly bag full of something.
I didn't know what was in the bag either. I wrote, he's acting all creepy, and then she washes the dishes and she finds blank under the sink. And I had no idea what the heck she found under the sink.
And then I guess she brought stuff with her. She's like wearing one of his shirts or something. So she's looking for her things. She's looking all over the house. And then she opens an ice chest and she finds a dead body, which is presumably Betty, Jim's ex-wife. And he comes in and he says, I don't want to hurt you. I just want to preserve you.
So then he drags her into the closet and locks her inside with like all these other women that he presumably abducted. But they're not just like rotting corpses. He like preserved them in some way, and he's like posed them in that House of Wax kind of way. And so he's like posed them sitting or something like that, which was just weird. Yeah, so she's locked. Yeah, she's locked in a closet with these presumably the women that Jim killed. And
and then she somehow forces her way out of that room. I thought the cool effect was as she's running out, it's like Betty is screaming from inside the ice chest, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, Betty starts banging on the freezer, and then Sue runs out of the house and down the road. And I kind of want to be like, okay, granted, you probably know that Betty is dead and has been dead for a very long time in this freezer. But if she's like banging on it, help her out. Just like lift up the lid or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Karma.
Well, I guess she was in a panic. Yeah. And she gets picked up. She flags down a truck that has a deer mounted on the front of it. Yeah, and she gets picked up by this guy, and she's talking to him about how she, went home with someone and blah, blah, blah. And he says, like, you're no better than a $10 tramp. Just a little, which is pretty unfair.
It is unfair, but it was $10 in 1989. So with inflation, I would say that's like a $50 tramp in 2019.
Right. So maybe he meant it in a nice way.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. I mean, I guess all the episode, or this part of the episode is about, the dangers of going home with someone you don't know, but it doesn't establish that it's like a regular habit of hers.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's like Freddy's Nightmares decided to tackle after school specials.
Yeah, and so he pushes her out of the moving car, And then she comes across two more men in the woods, and it's sort of...
And they're like all creepy too, because they're like cleaning their guns or something, and they're looking at her like they're gonna devour her or something. And then we find out that those two guys are the sons of the guy who picked her up in the truck and then pushed her out.
Yeah, and they say they want to hunt her, and they're going to give her a 5-minute head start.
Oh, and that they also knew Betty as well.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so they knew Betty, and that they want to hunt Sue, and they're going to give her a head start. So I think it's safe to assume that this is how Betty also met her demise.
Yeah, although Betty was Jim's ex-wife. I don't know. Seems like the circumstances of Betty being there would be different from the circumstances of Sue being there, but...
Well, that's true. Yeah, well, sometimes, like, divorced couples, after it's all said and done, they kind of, like, sometimes they hook up afterward or whatever, so maybe something like that happened. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Or, like, she was coming over to get all of her stewardess clothes, and that's when he was like, no, I'm just going to give you a 5-minute head start.
Right.
Leave the clothes here. So, So she takes advantage of her 5-minute head start, as I think anyone would. And so she's, like, running through the woods. But she's, like, really calm and collect running through the woods. I would be screaming at the top of my lungs, like, Jesus, help me. Like, anybody, help me get away from these guys. And then, so she's running through the woods, and then Jim ends up finding her. And he takes her, Jim finds her, and then he takes her back to the house, and the sons and the dad are there, and then they take her picture when she's, like, all tied up.
Yes.
Yeah, so she's assumingly going to be added to the fetish book collection.
Yeah, like she's in this horrible situation and about to be tortured and killed, and then she wakes up on the porch where she was drinking her coffee before. And it was all a dream, and it's a beautiful day, and she's just normally packs up her stuff and she's about to leave, and then she walks in on Jim with all the stewardess bodies.
Yeah. I put that he was embalming women. Yeah,
I guess it would have to be doing something with them, because rotting corpses would probably smell pretty bad.
Yeah. What do you use, like formaldehyde or something?
I guess.
You don't know these things?
I don't.
You don't? But you watch so many horror movies. Yeah, I have quite a few friends over the years have come to me and just like, hey, how would you kill somebody? Like, first of all, like, why are you asking me this? And second, I actually have quite a few ways I would kill somebody. Right. Why do you ask? And it's all because, oh, well, you watch so many horror movies. Like, I just figured that you would know what to do or whatever. And it's like, well, give me a chainsaw. I can probably help you out. I don't know.
But why are they asking, though? Like,
no, it was just, drunk talks or whatever.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah, as far as I know, no one that I know is serving time for prison or is serving time for murder.
Okay.
So I don't think they ever went through with it. Just friendly talk.
Good to know.
Yeah, so she sees Jim embalming all these women, and she runs out of the house and is hit by the truck driver who picked her up in her dream, and then she dies.
Yes.
And that's the episode, yeah.
Freddy hangs like a target of her on the wall, and he says, everything's an endangered species these days, especially nice girls. But I feel like this episode was a little slut-shamey.
It was. But I mean, it's like, and I was thinking that when I was watching this too, like, if Sue wants to go and like go home with a guy, it's totally, now I'm getting that one song that if I want to take a guy home with me tonight, none of your business. Whatever song that is.
That song. Yeah. It's,
so that's
Salt
like,
and Pepper,
okay.
right?
Yeah, it is. So that's totally going through my head now. But yeah, exactly what Salt and Pepper are preaching. That, I mean, if she wants to do this, then that's what she should do. And yeah.
Right. I mean, it must be rough. Like, the guy she was seeing died, a week ago, I guess, if the funeral had just happened. So it's, I mean, it's really soon, but, she's not looking for a relationship. And if that's, if going home with a guy helps her, get through it, she should be able to do that.
Oh yeah, and that's such like an emotional time, and to have that kind of like heartache, that maybe she just needs to feel a physical connection with someone. She doesn't really want to be emotionally involved, but she just needs to feel something,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people do strange things when they're heartbroken.
Yeah. So we're Team Sue rather than, on the side of the guy trying to kill her.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, Freddy's Nightmares and their take on an after-school special. It just, the message was more or less, don't go home with a stranger, but also you're an adult and you can do whatever you want, so.
Right.
So leave Sue alone.
Right.
How did you feel about this episode overall?
I mean, I love Leslie Deane. So I was excited to see her. Out of, before we started doing this podcast, I'd only seen about 5 or 6 episodes, and this was one of them, solely because Leslie Deane was in it. But apart from that, it was okay.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. What did you think?
I was sort of on the same lines as you. I really appreciate Leslie Deane as an actor. I hadn't seen this previously, but I really liked her in it. The storyline itself, I did not care for the first half at all. It was just too all over the place. I did like the second half better. I wished it would have been the script and the story would have been a little bit tighter, a little like cleaned up a lot. But it's the same old thing with Freddy's Nightmares, where they jump from dream to reality so much that after a while you're just like, come on, like,
right.
Help me out a little bit. Give me something to hold on to. It's not one of the better episodes, but it is one that was like at least watchable. Because there are some episodes that we had to sit through, and it's just like, oh man.
Right.
Can someone pass me a Miller Lite?
Exactly.
It was alright. I would recommend this episode to people who like Freddy's Dead and who like Leslie Deane. But if it was just like, oh hey, recommend some of the episodes, this wouldn't be in the list.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not one of the worst, but it's not one of the better ones either.
So do you have anything for next week's episode?
Thanks so much for listening. Please join us next week when we talk about season 1, episode 17, Love Stinks, where Jeffrey Combs explodes in a pizza place.